All right, good morning and welcome to 10 Minutes in the Text. We are looking this morning at Hosea 4. I hope you got a hot drink. It's a cold one here in Central Texas, but let's go ahead and dive right in to Hosea 4. So we've been working our way through the book of Hosea. We know Hosea, the basics. Hosea is a prophet. He's called to marry Gomer, who is a prostitute, who's someone who is constantly being pulled away from him. And so we see this as the example of God's love, then, as Hosea is called to love Gomer, so God too loves his people, even though they are running away from him. So let's dive in here, Hosea 4, verse 1. Hear the word of the Lord, O children of Israel. So here, this is not just about Hosea and Gomer, this is about the whole nation. For the Lord has a controversy with the inhabitants of the land. All right, so something's going on here with the people. Now, take a look here at the land. All right, when you see the land, this is going to be the promised land. That's what I'm going to assume. We'll keep reading and see if that changes, but usually this is the promised land, another significant identifier of the people of Israel. There is no faithfulness or steadfast love. Let's hold on to this. I wonder if we're going to get juxtaposition here of that. And no knowledge of God in the land. Yeah, so I'm guessing here that this is the promised land, right? This is the land, not the land of the Gentiles, not the land of the foreigner, but this is the land, the uh, promised land. There is swearing, lying, murder, stealing, and committing adultery. They break all bounds, and bloodshed follows bloodshed. Okay, this is interesting. Swearing, lying, murder, stealing, committing adultery. So here we see their fruit is sinfulness, right? All these things that we see happening. They break all bounds. So here's another look at that, fruit being sinfulness, and bloodshed follows bloodshed. So it's almost as if these things are building on top of each other. We have these sins, they're breaking the bounds, bloodshed follows bloodshed, so it keeps going. Therefore, the land mourns. Now, this is interesting, right? Because the land, this is the promised land, so the land mourns. So why does the promised land mourn? This is something to look into. Why does the promised land mourn? I think there's something there about how we look at the land, the promise, how that's more than just the physical place. There's something more happening here. All who dwell in it languish. So the people, all who dwell, that's going to be the people, languish. And also the beasts of the field and the birds of the heaven. So their sin is so intense that it's also hitting the animals, right? And here we go, even the fish of the sea are taken away. So here we have, sin's effects are not just personal, but also environmental. It's affecting everything around them. Yet let no one contend and let no one accuse, for with you is my contention, O priest. Okay, this is interesting. Let no one contend and let no one accuse. So sin's happening, but don't accuse. That's interesting. For with you is my contention, O priest. Okay, so here we go. With you is my contention, who? O priest. Now, I'm actually going to break out the purple here because I want to see what's the contention God has with the priest? What's happening here? I want to dive deeper into that as I go into my sermon studying throughout the day today. You shall stumble by day, the prophet also shall stumble with you by night. Okay, so you here is taking us back to the priest, right? Back to this line. But he also says, the prophet shall also stumble with you by night. So we have by day and by night, and I will destroy your mother. Let's purple that one again. That's something I want to dig deep into. What's this look here of mother? What's happening here? What can we find out more is going on there? My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, because you have rejected knowledge. I reject you from being a priest to me. So, okay, my people are destroyed by what? Lack of knowledge. And why? Because you have rejected knowledge. Okay, who's you? All right, I reject you from being a priest to me. So something's going on here. Something's happening with the priests. All right, so we'll find more about that. That's something else I'll dive into. And you, since you have forgotten the law of your God, I also will forget your children. So there's something here about how the priests are forgetting the law. And so God's saying, listen, because you're not teaching, because you're not doing these things, I'm going to forget you and your children. And this would be, the Levitical priesthood, the people who are charged with being priests. What's going on here that God's going to forget them, that they're not paying attention, those kinds of things. The more they increased, the more they sinned against me. I will change their glory into shame. All right, so they and their, I believe this is referring back to priests. So I want to dive that. So I'm gonna circle that in purple too to make sure that I'm right. Because one thing is we read scripture, we don't always want to just go with our first hit. If there's something that's kind of questioned, like let's look deeper. Let's see how this connects across the board. They feed on the sin of my people. They are greedy for their iniquity. And I think this is still referring to the priests. And it shall be like people, like priests. I will punish them for their ways. So here it's almost this cause, right? That the priests are causing the people to be this way. And I will punish them for their ways and repay them for their deeds. They shall eat, but not be satisfied. They shall play the whore, but not multiply. Okay, so think about this, right? Think when you're really hungry, you want to be full. And, let's get biblical here. The play of the whore, so sexual immorality, satiating that desire for lust and those kinds of things, but they don't multiply, right? So the ultimate point of uh, sex is as a gift and all those things, but it's for children. And so here God's saying basically, you're going to follow your lusts, but not get the we'll call it fruit, the produce. You're not going to get that. That's not going to come um, through these ways that it's supposed to. So you won't be satisfied. You won't multiply. You won't bear children. Why? Because they have forsaken the Lord, to cherish whoredom, wine, and new wine, which take away the understanding. Okay, so here, what God's saying is, listen, you've chased these lusts. And so good things, food, wine, new wine. And in fact, I want to circle why he says wine and new wine. I want to look into that and find out why we're getting that there. Um, you're following after these things lustfully, sinfully, instead of seeking them in the ways God has set it up, and so it's not producing anything. So then, my people inquire of a piece of wood. All right, so piece of wood, this is going to be an idol of some kind, some kind of god. And their walking staff gives them oracles. Again, this is going to be some kind of god slash pantheon, right? Some kind of worship style, soothsaying thing here. The spirit of whoredom has led them astray, and they have left their God to play the whore. Okay, so whoredom and whore here, we're just saying that a lot today. But those two things, it's about that the people of Israel are following their lusts, right? So they're pursuing these things. They sacrifice on the tops of mountains and burn offerings on the hills. All right, tops of mountains. You'll see throughout Scripture, um, especially in the Old Testament, referring to the high places, right? Think Mount Olympus, right, is a high place. That's where the gods live. And so they're looking and saying, hey, you're sacrificing on the high places. These idol temples under oak, poplar, and terebinth. So these different trees, because their shade is good. Again, these are going to connect you to the high places, to idol worship. Therefore, your daughters play the whore, and your brides commit adultery. Um, this is some pretty intense language here. What you have to understand is they've run from the ways of God, and these idols, um, the idol worship and the cults at the time, sex is a part of that worship. And so this is not just saying, oh, they, threw prudence to the wind, or they're not being chaste, or those kinds of things. It's not just that. It's also that they are using sex and those kinds of things as worship of other gods. And they would take then the women at that time, and it would become a piece of a degradation of who they are. Um, and so here's what then God says, right? Watch how he follows this up. I will not punish your daughters when they play the whore, nor your brides when they commit adultery. For the men themselves go aside with prostitutes and sacrifice with cult prostitutes, and people without understanding shall come to ruin. So here what we're seeing is, while it's Hosea and Gomer, what is happening within the culture of Israel at that time is they are running to temple prostitutes, right? The men are running to temple prostitutes. So this chapter 4 of Hosea really gives us this understanding of how this has culturally become a thing. And so connecting this with what's happening in the rest of Hosea, looking at what's going on, and then we'll pull in the redemption that comes from other places. But this week is going to say, what happens when you forget God? What happens when you seek after these pleasures and they replace God? What does that do across the board? So we'll dive into that this Sunday. Glad to have you here with me on 10 Minutes in the Text. We'll see you again back next Tuesday on our regular scheduled time. But it's been great being with you this morning. Have a great morning, and we'll see you this Sunday.